Hi, this is Kelsey Fikowski, and in this video segment, we're going to be looking at the new redesigned AP Gov exam, and hopefully by the end of this video segment, you'll have a better idea of some of the major changes that are coming in this new exam. So, there are three core sections to the AP Gov curriculum. They include the practices and reasoning processes, big ideas, and content outline. So with respect to the practice and reasoning processes, the multiple choice questions as well as the FRQ questions are going to contain at least one or more of these practice and reasoning processes. In particular, concept application. Some of these questions may ask you to describe political principles, institutions, as well as even comparing these institutions to one another. In addition, there will be a heavy emphasis, as always, on Supreme Court or SCOTUS application, where you're going to be asked to, once again, explain how a required Supreme Court case might relate to a foundational document, or comparing reasons or decisions or opinions of the Supreme Court to another case. That is definitely going to be seen on the AP Gov exam. What's nice about this AP Gov exam with respect to the Supreme Court cases is that there are set lists of Supreme Court cases that you need to know for this exam, and I have made a video of that, and there is a link below that so you can look at it, explaining everything you need to know about that particular case. Now, there are going to be non-required cases on the exam, but those facts are going to be explained. What you're going to have to do is, when those facts are explained for the non-required SCOTUS cases, is be able to compare it to the required cases that you need to know for this exam, perhaps looking at why a case was ruled that particular way. There's also a huge emphasis on data analysis. Don't be surprised if you're going to be seeing tables, you're going to be seeing pie charts to a much greater degree that you saw on previous exams. So you might be looking at campaign finance. You also could be looking at voting and demographic patterns. That's, again, a huge emphasis of this exam. In addition, source analysis is a big part of this. The questions are going to require the student to describe the author's claims, explain the author's argument with respect to the political principles studied, or explain what the implications of that argument may be. And then the last part is argumentation. The student is going to be asked in an essay format that I'm going to get to at the end of this video to articulate a thesis and support it with relevant evidence and be able to refute opposing or alternate perspectives. Now, with respect to the reasoning aspects of this part here, in particular, definition and classification of many terms. You know, prior exams were almost like a glorified vocabulary exam. Certainly that is going to be part of it, but also to a larger extent, you're going to be describing structures and functions of various branches. Again, vocab is going to be seen there, but instead of just simply rote memorization, you're going to be having to classify it, describe it, showing a greater understanding, and that's going to come out in these multiple choice questions as well as the FRQ questions. With respect to the political process here, that's going to be important in terms of knowing steps or stages of a process, for example, how a bill gets passed. Causation, explaining cause and effect. Explain change over time, explain the implications of that change over time as well. And the last part here for the reasoning is comparison. Again, looking at relevant categories of comparison, identifying similarities and differences, and even explaining the reasons for these similarities or differences. So again, it goes into a lot greater depth. There's a lot more focus on analysis that you're going to be seeing in these multiple choice questions as well as the FRQ questions. So definitely some significant changes here. And then there are big ideas. This was similar to the AP US exam. If you've taken that or you are familiar with that curriculum, they have a set of big ideas, and now the AP Gov exam is doing that as well. And again, it's probably a good idea to understand these big ideas, but you're never going to be asked to identify this theme in a multiple choice question or an FRQ. But again, with the greater context of everything that's going to be studied in AP Gov, it's probably a good idea to at least have some idea or understanding of these. And these you see here: constitutionalism, liberty and order, civic participation in a representative democracy, complete policymaking interests, and methods of political analysis. what you have to understand is this is fairly similar with respect to the content in the past exams. They're just now making it much more theme-based. Much of the content has not changed. It's more the level of skill that's going to be required in this exam. With respect to the content outline, there are big ideas that are linked to these enduring understandings. In particular, what it used to be called constitutional underpinnings, which would look at the Constitution, is now classified as foundations of American democracy. Interactions among branches of government. Again, all these different units are just being renamed, but a lot of the content still remains the same. And I do have a link to the curriculum underneath should you want to take a closer look to the descriptions. But again, many of the units are still remaining the same. Just maybe a tweak here or there, but again, the real focus is the skills, the analysis that's going to be involved on the part of the student. There are also specific documents that students are going to need to know for the AP Gov exam, and these are foundational documents. Sometimes the students will be asked to compare and contrast this perhaps to a Supreme Court decision or how one was related to another. So again, there is a significant focus on certain documents compared to others, and you're going to see a number of primary source documents from your typical Federalist Number 10 to the Declaration of Independence, Articles of Confederation. What is interesting, they do add other ones here, like a letter from a Birmingham jail by Martin Luther King Jr., Federalist Number 70. Those two documents typically have not appeared in previous AP Gov exams. Now they are. So again, the real emphasis on the students knowing that. And then, as I said earlier, there are specific Supreme Court cases that students have to definitely know, and they will be asked to compare and contrast those to another court case that they're not required to know, but the facts will be given. So again, really focusing on that comparison and making those important connections. And again, a video link is available should you want to check out which Supreme Court cases you need to know, as well as their respective important details there. And then you're going to be seeing a number of qualitative sources, again, in terms of looking at specific rulings, looking at text-based sources, and then also a heavy focus on quantitative sources, as I said earlier, whether this is going to be looking at voting trends, demographics, you name it, it's going to be there. I also just want to flip back real quickly to the qualitative. Don't be surprised if you see a number of political maps, if you see political cartoons. That's going to also be emphasized throughout this exam. So giving you a snapshot of how this exam has changed, now you're going to have 55 questions. That is reduced, and you have an hour and 20 minutes, and that will comprise of 50% of the exam. And then you still have 4 free response questions. These have changed a little bit, but every single exam, whether you take it now or in the 2018-2019 school year or 5 years from then, there's going to be one question dedicated to concept application, another one dedicated to quantitative analysis, another one dedicated to SCOTUS comparison, and then the new big change is the argument essay. So this, you will have an hour and 40 minutes to complete. Again, it is 50% or 12.5% each. And with respect to the multiple choice, you can really see how this has drastically changed. Under the old exam, really focus on rote memorization. A simple question here, for example, which of the following is not a linkage institution? Again, very clear, cut and dry answer, A. The new exam, expect something like this. You see a political cartoon, you see, you have a number of Supreme Court or number of Supreme Court justices here with Harvard, Yale, etc. Obama saying, nice to see growing diversity in the Supreme Court. The student would have to be able to determine that going to a high-ranking college is an informal requirement. Again, going from the old exam to the new exam, notice you're interpreting this political cartoon, you're inferring, you're trying to describe what this is all about. This was a multiple choice question I came up with. They do have a sample exam. I did not want to post those questions word for word for copyright purposes, but you can again check that in the description below under the curriculum that has just been released. If you go to the end, you'll see a number of questions. With respect to the free response questions, very similar to the past FRQs with respect to the first three. Again, the only difference is that there's always going to be a SCOTUS comparison, always going to be quantitative analysis, always going to be some type of concept application. With this, not going to require an intro or conclusion. You basically just state what you know. You might have to explain a specific political principle. You do that. Same thing with quantitative analysis, no intro, no conclusion. Analyze the data. You might have to identify a trend or pattern, or draw some type of conclusion. Again, you just state that as it is. With respect to the SCOTUS comparison, again, taking one of the Supreme Court cases you have to know, compare it to a non-required Supreme Court case. Well, they will provide those facts for you, and you have to explain how that information can be connected, compared, depending on what the question is asking you. The big difference here is the essay. This has never been seen on an AP Gov exam before, but the argument essay is to develop an argument in the form of an essay using evidence from one or more required foundational documents. So it's going to require the student to articulate a defensible claim and thesis, support an argument with relevant evidence, organize and analyze evidence explaining its significance to justify the thesis, and then refute, concede, or rebuttal in responding to opposing or alternate perspectives. It would be very common, perhaps, to see an argument essay that asks you to compare one or two, maybe even three of the foundational documents to each other and explain how one might be more democratic than another, and then bring in outside evidence. So again, this has rapidly changed. There is a rubric associated with this, as there is with every other FRQ, but this is going to require more of a thesis statement. So this again is very drastic in terms of change, but it is only worth 12.5% of the exam, just like this FRQ, which is going to probably take considerably less time, but nevertheless, you do have all of the hour and 40 minutes allocated, and the student, of course, can use that however he or she wishes to. All right, and then again, just to go back here to this, the setup of this exam, here you have it, 4 FRQs, 55 multiple choice questions. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but one thing that is nice about the multiple choice questions, even though they are harder, the number of options the student can possibly choose from goes from 5 to 4. So again, a 5% increase that the student will get the correct answer, assuming he or she is guessing, which I guess is nice. All right, so the last part is going to be the Civics Project. This has nothing to do with the exam, but it has more to do with the actual course. And this can be done in a number of different ways. But what some of the overarching requirements for the Civics Project that are required as part of the AP Gov curriculum include connecting the course concept to real-world issues, however the student may see fit, must demonstrate disciplinary practices, must share and communicate their findings in an authentic way, meaning that it could be a presentation, could be a speech, a number of different academic methods can be done. The project can be done individually or through small groups, and the AP Gov College Board people say that it can be completed before or after the AP exam. I would suggest completing this after the AP exam should you have the time, especially for schools that finish later in June. I think that's a great opportunity to do that because you really want to be not cramming, but you really want to focus the bulk of your efforts towards the exam from September or August all the way through the exam in May. One thing that is interesting about this Civics Project is that it can be partisan if chosen by the student. The teacher cannot assign a partisan type of project to the student, but nevertheless, if the student chooses it him or herself, that is completely fine. But again, I wouldn't worry too much about the Civics Project. I'd be worried more about understanding the new skills that are required as part of this new exam. So best of luck. Again, check out the links below. Hopefully you'll have a better understanding as to what is required. Thank you very much.